After watching this movie, nothing was the same again, because it made me wonder, do we all come with a defined purpose, like Joe with jazz, or like Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo with soccer? Does that mean life is only about that? About fulfilling a purpose, and that's it? If you've ever thought that way, maybe this analysis will help you see things from another perspective. Joe works as a band teacher at a school. He tries to lead a group of disorganized students while maintaining an enthusiastic rhythm. Everyone's disinterested, except Connie, a shy girl who lifts her trombone and plays a short but soulful solo. Joe smiles proudly until the others' laughter ruins the moment. Then he stops the class and says that getting lost in music is a good thing. He sits at the piano and tells them how, as a child, his father took him to a jazz club. There, he saw a musician so immersed that he seemed to float. From that moment on, he knew he wanted to make music for the rest of his life. A knock on the door interrupts the class. It's Principal Arroyo, who gives him important news. The district has decided to hire him as a full-time teacher. A steady job, benefits, pension. Joe thanks her, but deep down, he isn't happy. Later, at his mother's tailor shop, the news is celebrated, but Joe tries to explain that he has other plans. His mother insists they didn't work so hard for him to end up washing her laundry in the shop. She wants him to stay away from bars and underpaid gigs. She wants him to have a real career. Joe says yes, even though he doesn't feel it. Then the phone rings. It's Curly, a former student who is now a professional drummer. He tells him he's playing with Dorothy Williams, a jazz legend, and they need a pianist for that very night. Joe is thrilled. He runs through the streets of New York, dodging everything in his path. He arrives at the club and enters respectfully. Dorothy calls him to the stage without hesitation. Joe sits down, nervous. They begin to play. Joe hesitates, but then lets go. He closes his eyes and lets his fingers speak. For a moment, he forgets about the world. He's in the zone. When he opens his eyes, he thinks he messed up. But Dorothy says, "Get yourself a good suit. You're playing with us tonight." Joe bursts with joy. He walks out into the street and screams with excitement. But he's so distracted, he falls into an open manhole. The fall sends him into a glowing tunnel. He's no longer a body. He's a glowing soul. In the distance, a white light calls him. It's the great beyond. But Joe refuses. He can't die today. He runs among the other souls, desperate, until he falls again. But not to the beyond. He lands in a different place, a colorful meadow full of tiny new souls. A being named Jerry appears and kindly explains that he's not in heaven or hell, he's in the great before, the place where each new soul is formed. Joe, confused, asks if he's dead, but one of the Jerrys tells him no. His body is in a kind of waiting state. Then they take him to the U seminar, a place where souls receive their personalities before going to Earth. Joe watches as traits like nervous, distracted, enthusiastic are assigned, and asks how they get to the world. They point him to a portal. He tries to jump in, but bounces off. By mistake, he's assigned as a mentor. Joe takes advantage of this to avoid being sent to the great beyond. They explain that souls need to find their spark before going down to Earth, and mentors are there to help them. Joe comes up with a plan. If he manages to help a soul find its spark, he'll take its past to return to his body. He steals the badge of a certain Dr. Borgenson, sneaks into the program, and gets paired with soul number 22. 22's had hundreds of mentors: Gandhi, Lincoln, Mother Teresa, Muhammad Ali, and none of them succeeded in making her want to live. Now it's Joe's turn. From the start, 22 treats him with sarcasm and mockery. In the middle of their interaction, they end up inside Dr. Borgenson's museum, filled with memories, achievements, and awards. 22 suggests pretending they tried, and then each go their own way. She says she already knows everything about Earth, and that it's not worth it. Then, Joe confesses he's not a real mentor. 22 mocks him. But when a scanner is activated, the real-life museum appears. Joe's. There are no awards, only his keyboard, his classes, his half-finished dreams. 22 looks at him with a mix of mockery and pity. Among the memories, one shows Joe as a child, complaining to his father about having to go to a jazz club. But as soon as he heard the pianist, he fell in love with jazz. The tour continues, and less pleasant memories appear. Failed auditions, multiple rejections, monotonous classes, a lonely life, and finally, Joe in the hospital. He looks at everything and says, "My life was empty." Desperate, he demands that 22 give him her badge so he can return to his body. But she shows him that she can't hand it over until it becomes a real Earth pass. Joe offers to help her get it. If they succeed, she'll give him the badge. 22 agrees. They go to a memory that's supposed to inspire. Joe playing with Dorothy Williams, but the badge doesn't change. 22 tells him she doesn't like music. Joe takes 22 to the Hall of Everything, a place where souls try different human activities to discover their spark. He shows her everything: art, pizza, sports, science, even being president. But 22 isn't excited about any of it. Everything seems boring to her. 22 drags Joe to her secret hideout, where she keeps memories of Earth and badges from former mentors. She confesses that she's never wanted to live, but watching Joe try so hard to return to his sad and pathetic life has made her curious. Let's begin analyzing the characters. The museum sequence revealed a lot about Joe. Notice how, when he entered Dr. Borgenson's museum, the first thing he focused on was the achievements and awards he had received. He assumed that life had meaning because of those things. Then, when he saw his own museum, he compared his life to the doctor's and felt disappointed. He only focused on the fact that he didn't achieve what he wanted as a musician, and that was enough for him to conclude that his life hadn't meant anything. Joe has come to believe that finding your spark is the same as having a single purpose, and that a life is only worthwhile if you manage to fulfill it. For him, that purpose is jazz. And because he didn't succeed as a professional musician, he feels that his life has no meaning. Everything else has taken a back seat to that fixed idea that his life only matters if he plays jazz professionally. That's why he's so determined to return to Earth. Playing in that concert, according to him, would give meaning to everything. Now let's move on to 22. Unlike Joe, 22 doesn't feel passionate about anything. She seems uninterested in living. She has an arrogant, mocking attitude, as if nothing matters to her. But often, when someone acts that way, what they're really doing is hiding an insecurity. If we look more closely, we can see that 22 is defensive. Even though she says she doesn't want to live, deep down, she does care. What happens is that she's afraid. She believes she's going to fail. Think about it. 22 was paired with historical figures who accomplished enormous things. She didn't identify with any of her mentors. And to make things worse, instead of helping her, they criticize her, scold her, and make her feel that if she doesn't aspire to something big, then she doesn't matter. That if she isn't like them, she doesn't deserve to live. And of course, if that's the only valid way to exist, she starts to believe she's not made for life. This issue of historical figures got me thinking quite a bit, because it's common to use them as examples for inspiration. And it makes sense. They're people who did important things and made a difference. Of course it can be helpful to look up to them, see what they're capable of, and ask ourselves what we might do. For many, that can be motivating. But I also wonder, what about those who don't have that kind of ambition? Who don't dream of doing something huge? Because many times, when we talk about these great figures, we reduce their lives to what they accomplished publicly, to their grand achievements, as if everything else didn't matter. And that, without realizing it, can lead us to believe that the only life that counts is one filled with things like that. That precisely seems to be 22's case. And seeing her, I can't help but think of how many of us have felt like 22. Not good enough to try something. We're paralyzed by the idea of failure, so we don't even try. Because deep down, we believe we're going to fail. And if we don't try, at least we don't fail. But that's not the truth. It's just a belief that got stuck here. We all have insecurities and limitations, but that doesn't mean we're doomed to fail. And now, why does Joe catch 22's attention? Because deep down, they're alike. Joe also carries a sense of inadequacy and frustration. He's been rejected many times, and yet he persists. He clings to the idea of going back, and that intrigues 22. Why would someone want to return to such an ordinary life? Just a quick pause to say that if you're enjoying this video and haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. It would mean a lot and really helps me keep making more videos and content like this. Alright, let's get back to the story. Both of them dive through a tunnel and arrive at the astral plane, a dimension between the physical and the spiritual. There, they see souls in the zone, completely focused on the activities they love. Joe recognizes the place. He had already been there when he played with Dorothy. But there are also lost souls. Dark, giant, disconnected beings. One of them chases them until it's caught by a rope. A psychedelic ship appears, with sails and music. And from above descends Moonwind, an eccentric mystic. 22 tells Joe that he can help him. Moonwind and his crew help lost souls return to themselves. They free the creature, who turns out to be a stockbroker trapped in his obsession with work. Upon awakening, he throws away his computers and celebrates being alive. Joe, encouraged, asks for help to return to his body. Moonwind agrees. Aboard the ship, Joe asks where their bodies are and if their souls are in the astral plane. The crew responds. Some are meditating, others are playing music, and Moonwind is actually in New York, juggling in the street with a sign. When they pass by many lost souls, Moonwind explains that they're not so different from those in the zone. Passion can turn into obsession, and that disconnects you from life. He himself, he says, was once lost because of Tetris. Moonwind and the astral plane reveal another central theme from the film. Being passionate about something is beautiful, but it can also become dangerous if that passion turns into an obsession, because when that happens, you disconnect from life. And I think that's exactly one of Joe's conflicts. It's good to have a dream, something that drives you, But what the film seems to tell us is that if your entire identity, your entire worth, and the entire meaning of your life revolves solely around that, then maybe you're trapping yourself. Joe loves jazz, but he's so obsessed with achieving that goal that he stopped seeing everything else. He's convinced that if he doesn't fulfill that dream, his life isn't worth it. And that has made him increasingly egocentric and selfish. Think about it. His initial plan was to steal 22's Earth Pass, and think about what that means. If 22 earns that pass, it's because she's finally found something that makes her want to live. But Joe doesn't care about that. He's only thinking about himself and his concert. Upon reaching the right spot, Moonwind opens a portal with stardust. He tells Joe that since he doesn't have a connection to his body, he must retune to it. Joe closes his eyes. He hears the heart monitor, smells the disinfectant, and feels a cat's fur on him. Moonwind warns him that it's not the moment to jump, but Joe jumps anyway, dragging 22 with him. But something goes wrong. Joe ends up in the cat's body, and 22 in Joe's. He tries to speak, but only meows. 22 can't explain herself either. The doctor decides to keep them under observation. They have just 10 minutes before they take the cat away. Joe convinces 22 to escape, but 22 stumbles, and Joe, in cat form, trips over and over again. Still, they manage to slip out unnoticed and reach the elevator. Out on the street, 22 is overwhelmed by the noise and the crowd. She runs to hide on a staircase. Joe follows her. To calm her down, he offers her a slice of pizza, and when she tastes it, her expression changes. For the first time, she feels something pleasant. She smiles. Feeling more at ease, 22 begins to enjoy herself. She eats a gyro, laughs at memories of her mentors, and for the first time, lives. On the corner, they find Moonwind, spinning a sign in a trance. They wake him and tell him what happened. Moonwind agrees to help them, but they must wait until the portal between Earth and the Astral Zone opens at 6:30. They agree to meet at the Half Note Club. Joe is in a hurry. It's almost time, and they still need to go home to shower and get ready. They flag down a taxi, but just then, Dorothy Williams gets out. The encounter is a disaster. 22 is wearing a dirty gown and eating pizza. Dorothy looks at her, confused. Joe, embarrassed, rushes 22 into the taxi. At his apartment, Joe gets a call from Curly. He says Dorothy got spooked and called another musician for the show. But he also tells him that Joe's class was the only thing he liked about school, that he owes him a lot, and he'll try to convince her, if Joe arrives well-dressed and on time. Joe gets ready, but a student, Connie, arrives to quit the band. 22, not fully understanding, encourages her to do it. They connect because both feel the world is absurd. But Connie says that before quitting, she wants to show her something she's practiced. She plays her trombone with passion, and 22 is mesmerized. Connie loves music, so she decides not to quit. Everything I said about 22, her fear of failure, her deep-rooted beliefs about not being enough or not deserving to live, is also key to understanding why her interaction with Connie was so important. Because there was another moment of identification. 22 saw herself in her, a girl full of doubts and fear, but who, despite that, chose to keep going. That stirred something in 22. Maybe, if someone like Connie, someone she related to, was able to find a reason to keep going, then maybe she can too. 22 returns to Joe and asks why Connie changed her mind. Joe tells her it's simple. She loves music. It's her thing. Intrigued, 22 agrees to help him get ready, but with one condition. She wants to keep exploring. Maybe she'll find something she likes too. Joe agrees. So 22 bathes and gets dressed. Joe, still in the cat's body, tries to fix 22's hair, but stumbles and ruins it. With time running out, they rush to Dez's barbershop, an old friend. Joe explains to 22 that he's the only one he talks to, but asks her to just listen this time. 22 doesn't listen. She speaks freely, shows everything she's learned, and captivates everyone. He reflects on how one knows that they're born for something, or chose the wrong path. Many people can relate. Dez confesses that he wanted to be a veterinarian, but when his daughter got sick, he chose barbering because it was more accessible. And even though it wasn't his plan, he's happy. In the end, he leaves the haircut perfect, and, jokingly, says that maybe he didn't invent blood transfusions, but he's definitely saving lives. Before saying goodbye, Dez thanks him for finally having a conversation that wasn't about jazz. Here we saw further evidence of how Joe's obsession with jazz has led him, perhaps without realizing it, to become selfish. Joe said he and Dez had been friends for years, but after the conversation with 22, it becomes clear that he didn't really know him. He had never taken an interest in his life. All they'd ever done was talk about Joe and about jazz. Joe has become disconnected from the life he does have and from the people around him, because he's completely consumed by the idea that his existence only matters if he achieves one specific thing. And when you cling so tightly to a single version of what you believe your life should be, you run the risk of not seeing everything else that's already there. On the other hand, I loved the conversation with Dez, because it seems to suggest something that, honestly, I also believe, at least here in 2025. I don't think the purpose of life is something fixed, predetermined, or just one thing you have to find, like it's a hidden treasure. Rather, I think it's something that's built. It's made of many parts, not just one. And we discover it over time, through experiences, sometimes by accident, and other times after many years. Des, for example, always wanted to be a veterinarian, but life took him down a different path. He ended up becoming a barber, and a very good one, who, besides cutting hair, manages to connect and create a space where people feel seen and heard. Does that mean he failed his purpose, or he simply redefined it? Maybe it was never about being a veterinarian. Maybe his real calling was to care for and accompany others, and he found another way to do it. Des joked that he didn't invent blood transfusions, but he's still saving lives, and even though he said it playfully, he's right. Because the conversation he had with 22 will influence her to feel, for the first time, a genuine desire to live. And who knows, maybe it'll change something in Joe, too. Meanwhile, in the Great Before, Terry, the universe's accountant, discovers that Joe returned to Earth alive and decides to go after him. Joe tries to stick to the plan, but 22 is enchanted by the world. She's jazzing, as she starts to say. She gets distracted, tears the pants, and they have to go to Joe's mother, the only one who can fix them. The problem, she doesn't know about the concert, and she doesn't like that Joe is a musician. When they arrive, Liba has already found out and confronts him. He always promises stability and then takes another gig. 22, following Joe's instructions, replies that she's never understood what he wants to do with his life. She says he can't be honest with her because she always disapproves. He's finally gotten the concert of his life, and she's upset. Liba tells him she doesn't want to see him suffer like his father, and that at least his father had her to help him move forward. Joe replies that music is all he thinks about, that it's not just his career, it's his reason for living, and that if he died today, it would hurt to think that his life meant nothing. Liba is moved. She opens a box she had kept for years and gives him his father's suit. She carefully mends it, and for the first time, she sees her son as he truly is. Now, dressed in the blue suit, Joe feels ready. But while they wait at the entrance of the half note, 22 stops to observe the world with new eyes. Every falling leaf, every laugh, every ray of sunlight, everything seems to be beautiful to her. In her pocket, she keeps small keepsakes. The thread Liba used to sew the suit, a candy Des gave her, a seed, treasures. Joe asks her if she's ready to leave the Earth now, but 22 confesses that she's always felt like something was wrong with her, that maybe she wasn't meant to live. Then, after talking to Joe about purpose and passion, she thought maybe her spark was simply looking at the sky or walking. Joe responds that those aren't purposes, that's just normal life. Moonwind appears to return them to their bodies, but 22, who for the first time feels the desire to live, refuses. She wants to find her spark on Earth. Joe insists that she'll achieve that only by returning to the U seminar. They argue, and 22 runs off. Joe chases after her, but Terry, the universe's accountant, catches them and takes them back. The Jerrys discover that 22 has earned her Earth pass. Joe, frustrated, claims it was thanks to him because she lived in his body. 22 throws the pass at him and disappears, repeating to herself that she's no good for anything. Joe then asks what his purpose was. Was it music? Walking? Living? But Jerry tells him, "We don't assign purposes. Where did you get that idea? A spark isn't an Earth purpose." Oh, you mentors with your passions, your purposes, your meanings of life. So basic. With the pass in hand, Joe jumps into the portal and returns to his body. He runs to the club. Dorothy tries to kick him out, but Joe begs for another chance. He tells her that playing is his purpose, his mission. She's convinced and gives him the spot. Joe looks at himself in the mirror and says, "Get ready. Your life is about to begin." The quartet shines. Joe plays like never before, and they receive a standing ovation. His mother, in the audience, watches with pride. Dorothy welcomes him to the group. At the end of the show, Joe asks Dorothy what comes next. She replies, "Come back tomorrow and do it again." But Joe doesn't feel the way he expected. He thought this day would change everything. Dorothy tells him the story of a fish who is searching for an ocean. An old fish tells him that what he's in is the ocean. But the young one replies, This is just water." Joe is left thoughtful. That night, alone at home, Joe sits at the piano. He takes from his pocket the small objects that 22 had collected. As he touches them, he remembers simple yet beautiful moments from his life. His childhood, his father, a bike ride, the beach with his mom, and a solitary dinner. Then he picks up the seed 22 had found, enters the zone, and goes to find her. Joe finally got what he had longed for. He looked at himself in the mirror and told himself that his life was about to begin. But afterward, not much happened. Life went on, just the same, with the same routine, day after day. He got what he wanted so badly, but not what he was truly looking for. The story Dorothy told him, the one about the fish, perfectly summed up everything we've been talking about. Joe became so obsessed with reaching that big moment, with finding the ocean, that he stopped seeing that he was already swimming in it. His life, the one that seemed like just water, was already full of meaningful things. He failed to see Curly, the former student who told him his class was what inspired him to study music. He couldn't see Connie, the girl who came to him when she was ready to give up, or Des, or his mother, or his new bond with 22. All of that was right in front of him, but he overlooked it because it didn't look like the dream he'd imagined. And I wonder if maybe his true purpose was never jazz, or at least not only jazz. He was just so convinced that the meaning of his life had to be there that he didn't realize he was already doing something incredibly valuable as a teacher. Maybe his true gift wasn't just playing music, but inspiring others. Joe finally came to the realization when he played the piano alone in his apartment. This time, he didn't see just jazz, and he didn't focus on what he had or hadn't achieved, like when he visited the U seminar. Now he looked at his life with different eyes. He paused in those simple moments, his family, a class, a quiet meal, a casual conversation. Moments that he had once discarded for not seeming important, he now cherished, because he understood that those too are part of the music. Joe finds 22 trapped in her pain, turned into a lost soul, overwhelmed by all those feelings of not being enough that she had carried for so long. Joe even overcomes a monstrous version of himself and manages to reach her. He gives her the seed and tells her she's ready to live. 22 hesitates. She says she's scared, that she never found her spark. Joe replies that she did, because the spark is not the purpose. The spark appears when you're ready to live. And she, he says, is very good at jazzing. That frees her. Joe accompanies 22 on her leap toward Earth, and just before they arrive, he lets go of her hand. It's her moment. And in the end, the one who truly managed to touch 22's soul wasn't a historical figure or a famous person. It was him, an ordinary man. Someone who had already done the very thing 22 feared most, failed, and moved forward. Joe is ready to go to the great beyond, but the Jerrys, inspired by his actions, give him a second chance. They ask him what he will do with his life now. Joe smiles and replies, "I don't know, but I'm going to live every minute of it." And so he opens the door of his building with a new perspective, finally ready to truly live. Sometimes we become so obsessed with our goals that we feel if we don't achieve them, our life's a failure, as if everything else didn't count. But if we allow ourselves to look around, we'll see that life also has meaning beyond those big dreams. That there is beauty in the everyday. Having a dream and pursuing it is fine. It's beautiful to have goals, to want to achieve something, and to work hard for it. But life isn't only about that. There's a quote by Alan Watts that I love, and I feel fits perfectly here. He says, "The meaning of life is just to be alive." It's so plain, so obvious, and so simple, and yet everybody rushes around in a great panic, as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. And I believe there's truth in that. Sometimes we live as if life were a test we have to pass or a checklist we have to complete. But it's not. As Herbert once said, life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. And that experience is made up of moments. Some sweet, others bitter, some big, others small, but all of them necessary. The meaning of life is not one single brilliant moment, but the sum of all that has been lived. And there's something else. I don't think it's a coincidence that the soul's name is 22, because it's around that age that many people start to wonder what to do with their life, what their purpose is, whether they're on time or already falling behind. And if you, watching this, identify with 22, I want to tell you something. Even if your purpose or purposes aren't clear yet, you don't need to wait to start living. There are moments when we simply don't know where to go, and that's okay. You don't always have to have everything figured out before you take the first step. Sometimes it's enough to follow your curiosity, to choose a path that intrigues you, even if you don't know where it leads. And in walking that path, little by little, you begin to build meaning. Not everyone came to be a genius, or a famous artist, or a revolutionary, or a Nobel Prize winner. Not everyone dreams of that, and not everyone needs to. Sometimes it's enough to touch just one person's life, or to learn to enjoy your own path. Being enough doesn't always have to be spectacular. Sometimes it just has to be authentic. You don't need to do something grand to deserve being here. Life doesn't demand greatness, it asks for presence. Every day matters. We have to learn to truly live, even when what we're living doesn't look like what we thought was the most important thing about us. Don't disregard those moments. Don't see them only as stepping stones to something else. Because if you reach the top without ever looking at the path, likely, achievement won't give you the meaning you were hoping for. Life is not a to-do list, but a pilgrimage. With good days, bad days, strange days, and all of that is what makes it whole. Hopefully we learn to enjoy it, to notice the simple things. Even if we don't have all the answers, maybe that's okay too. And to close, I want to talk a little about jazz. Everything we've said makes it impossible not to see jazz as a symbol within the film. Because if there's one thing that defines jazz, It's improvisation. Musicians don't follow a fixed score. They don't have every note planned. They create the music as they go. They make mistakes. They play. They try new things. And they let themselves go. Jazz, then, also symbolically expresses the message of the film. Joe, like many of us, spent much of his time believing that life had to follow an exact script, that he had to reach that big dream, fulfill the storyline he imagined when he was young, and only then be happy. But neither jazz nor life works that way. Life, like jazz, is played in the present. It's improvised. It doesn't always sound the way you expect. Sometimes there's harmony, other times disorder. There are awkward silences, notes that don't quite fit. But all of that is part of it too. Every performance is unique. There's no single right way to play jazz, just as there's no single right way to live. And think about this. The purpose of any song, whether it's jazz or not, isn't just to reach the chorus or the bridge or the final note. The meaning of the song lies in its entirety, in feeling it as it plays. The same goes for life. It's not about reaching one specific point. It's about being here, present while the music plays. And that, as 22 put it, means jazzing. Thanks for staying until the end of the video. Don't forget to subscribe and share it with a friend who you think might enjoy it. And you and I'll see you in the next one.